This alternate Cyclops from the Age of X Alpha storyline is so intimidating that you might mistake him for a supervillain. With a backstory so dark, it'll leave you wondering how he didn't become one. It all began at the age of 14 when his powers activated without warning while he was in a movie theater, liquefying 7 people including his parents. Scott was incarcerated thereafter, eventually being transferred to Alcatraz after the Emergency Power Act rendered the prison a mutants-only facility, where he caught the attention of Arcade, who's got quite the name for a prison governor. It was thanks to Arcade that we get this epic mask, complete with ruby quartz lenses in the eye holes to inhibit Scotty's eye lasers, and a remote control mechanism that has the mask open down the middle, enabling the beams to pass through. In fact, Arcade had Scotty's eyelids surgically removed in order to prevent him from shutting off his eye beams by himself, so that he could use Scott against his will as an execution method for the other mutant inmates. And after several years of this, Scott managed to get a hold of the remote and blasted his way out of the prison, freeing the remaining mutants and vaporizing Arcade. And before you ask, no, the basilisk does not turn people to stone with his gaze. He turns them to ash. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. And without further ado, let's get into number 9. Doctor Strange Fate. Ah yes, the good old DC vs Marvel comics. The series that not only pit all of our favorite heroes against one another despite their conflicting franchises, but did so while introducing amalgamations of our favorite heroes and villains. One such hero was the amalgamation of Charles Xavier, Doctor Strange, and DC's Doctor Fate. But as it turns out, this convoluted mashup of a character is more than just a one-hit wonder. See, Strange Fate had discovered that restoring the Marvel and DC universes would result in the destruction of his own amalgam universe. And so he did everything that he could to try and prevent it, which, judging by the fact that you've probably never heard of this dude, was a task that he ultimately failed. However, while he couldn't prevent the destruction of his reality, he decided that he could at least save his own tail. And he did so by infusing his own psyche deep within that of Doctor Strange, where he was able to subtly manipulate the Sorcerer Supreme into creating several cross-dimensional incursions. But ultimately, his existence was discovered by Batman and Access. And so, instead of just erasing the dude, Strange decides to preserve the entire amalgam universe within a pocket dimension, thus ensuring that Strange Fate would never be able to menace with the Marvel or DC universes again. At number 8, we have Jean Grey the Conqueror. We all know Marvel just loves to introduce super cool takes on our favorite characters and then proceed to do absolutely nothing with them. I'm looking at you, Galactus Buster Armor. And no missed opportunity makes me as sad as this entry does, cause in the all-new X-Men number 25, we're briefly told about numerous dark realities which don't end very well for our X-Men, including an alternate reality in which Jean Grey was consumed by her inner darkness and went on to conquer the planet by force. You see, a couple of realities next door, and Jean Grey ain't the telepathic sweetheart we all know and love, on account of the fact that her early formative years were not spent with Charles Xavier, who was to teach her how to control her powers and to help her mold her persona, thus putting her in touch with her humanity. Instead, the Jean of this earth listened to Magneto, who taught her how it was a mutant's birthright to conquer, leading her to decide that the reason she was born with her powers was just that. And I don't know about you, but I definitely need the whole story which takes place in this reality. Marvel, if you're listening, get on it. At number 7, we have Professor Drake. Old Man Winter over here proves single-handedly that there is still hope for those of us who can't grow a beard. But who is the Ice Master, you ask? Well, simply put, he's the elderly future version of our favorite Iceman, with a new fitting superhero name to match his wizard-like appearance. See, fashion doesn't get much better in the future, so Ice Master makes do with his cloak. But the most notable difference, besides the beard of course, is how the Ice Master is able to more effectively channel his ice powers thanks to that ice spear of his. Man, if I had $1 for every time I said ice. Ice Master only really comes around with his presence as needed in the past, like that time he came from the future to the present to tell his younger self to give up fighting as it only leads to a dark future. Iceman ain't too convinced and the two even duke it out against one another. But they don't stay at each other's throats for long. In fact, during the second issue of Battle of the Atom, we get to see Iceman across 3 different eras fighting alongside each other. But regardless of which era we're talking about, I'm sure the lot of us can agree that Ice Master is the coolest. Ice cool, that is. At number 6, Planet X Rogue. The version of Rogue we get in Uncanny Avengers is probably the most powerful Rogue we've ever seen, and yes, that includes the countless versions of her imbued with the Phoenix Force. After taking a fatal blow that led me to believe that she expired for like half a dozen issues, she played a crucial role in thwarting off a celestial attack by absorbing the powers of every X-Men and Avenger available. We're talking hundreds of superheroes here, imbuing her with what's basically every superpower at once. And these powers ain't from lackluster players either. We've got some big names here like the Hulk and Wonder Man, just to name a couple. She becomes so insanely powerful that she's able to single-handedly slow Exitar's descent to Earth by pushing up against the bottom of his foot, and when Death Sentry held the other foot, Exitar was halted completely. Like, come on, you don't think that's epic? Sure, she couldn't stop him on her own, but come on, this dude is big enough to size up our entire planet, for crying out loud. His shoe size is bigger than Rhode Island. Need I go on? At number 5 is Bloodstorm. This version of Storm from an alternate reality is very similar to her canonical 616 counterpart, save for the fact that she was captured by Count Dracula in an attempt to turn her into his bride. And after becoming the vampiric Bloodstorm, she easily overthrew the Count and helped the X-Men defeat him. However, she ultimately decided not to return to the X-Men on account of her vampirism. She was later imprisoned by some of Dracula's disciples, and while attempting to escape, Monroe was confronted by one of her former teammates, Kitty Pryde, who attacked Bloodstorm as she'd rather see her friend perish than be a vampire. But Kitty hesitated at the last second, falling prey to Bloodstorm as her first victim. There's also a Bloodstorm from an alternate reality in which she was captured by Dracula first before joining the X-Men, where her bloodlust sadly overpowered her, resulting in her taking a big ol' bite of at least both Beast and Professor X. This reality's weather-controlling vampire proves without a doubt that sometimes the best way to improve a character is by adding fangs. At number 4 is Belasco, and no, I'm not talking about the supervillain. I'm talking about the X-Man who became the supervillain in an alternate timeline, that X-Man being Nightcrawler. And if that sounds a bit convoluted, you ain't heard of nothing yet. You see, the events of this timeline closely resemble that of Earth 616. That is until Nightcrawler loses his arm in battle and is forced to teleport to safety. Unfortunately for him, thanks to some Terrigen mist, some weird opposite day stuff is going on as he finds that everyone in the town he's transported himself to are mutants, whereas conversely the Nightcrawler seemed to be stripped of all his mutant powers and appearance, making him stand out as a regular dude among thousands of mutants. Yeah, for once it would have actually paid for Kurt to be blue. Kurt was attacked and slain by the people of the village for being different, because even though everything's different, nothing's really changed. Now, moments away from his own demise, Kurt was approached by the demonic Mephisto, who empowered that bitter voice deep down in Kurt's heart, which always tempted him to believe that those hateful and fearful beings he was sworn to protect were not worth the effort. Now imbued with a deep thirst for revenge against the world for treating him like the monster he appeared to be, Kurt was transformed into a demonic entity imbued with demonic powers and false memories that would perpetuate his unrelenting hatred, and manifesting the spitting image of Belasco, the X-Men's former nemesis. In fact, it was revealed that the Nightcrawler had actually been this reality's Belasco all along, thanks in part to a time loop set in motion by Captain America, who refused to deal with Mephisto and some time travel shenanigans. It's even hinted that Belasco's frequent targeting of the X-Men over the years is actually a subconscious cry for help. So this version of Nightcrawler makes for the perfect evil counterpart, as this pure-hearted X-Men had been compensating for his monstrous appearance with genuine kindness and optimism, doing his best to protect the world that hated him. Yet thanks to Mephisto, Kurt was forced into becoming the very thing he feared the most. At number 3 is Death. What do you get when you merge Wolverine with the Horsemen of the Apocalypse? You get the Eternal Rest itself. During an Avengers event which saw Kang damage the time stream, something he's prone to do at this point, the Avengers were faced with Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen, all of whom bearing uncannily resemblances to our favorite superheroes. We've got a demonic-looking 8-armed, 4-legged Spider-Man as our first horseman, Red Hulk as the Horseman of War, Scarlet Witch with the Black Horse, and finally Wolverine, the Horseman of Eternal Rest. And as for what makes this Wolverine special, aside from the fact that he's permanently fused with a floating horse, is the fact that Wolverine now embodies the very entropy of the universe itself. Well, that is, if he didn't already. At number 2 is the Witness. This alternate reality version of Gambit is himself a temporal anomaly existing at the junction where all timelines converge, thus allowing the Witness to exist at all points in time at once, enabling to perceive everything before it happens, and making for one of the coolest X-Men in the multiverse. Now, being the anomaly that he is, much of his origin is shrouded in mystery. In fact, when Bishop was tasked with gathering as much info on the dude as he could, the only clue we got was him saying, "I am LeBeau." And more than LeBeau, which is about as cryptic as you can get. Now, upon deeper investigation, I discovered that while many assumed the Witness to be an elderly Rami LeBeau, otherwise known as Gambit, it was revealed in the X-Men Future History Messiah War sourcebook, holy cow, what a mouthful, that the Witness was actually a different person altogether, a conclusion that I personally reject. I mean, come on, you're telling me that the Witness, the last guy to ever see the X-Men alive, whose name is LeBeau, isn't actually Gambit? Like, they both both even share the same Cajun accent, for crying out loud. Now this could be explained by a flashback where we see a 6-year-old Remy running into the Witness by chance, who became somewhat of Remy's mentor. But that doesn't really eliminate the possibility of these two being one and the same, since the Witness is a time traveler after all. There's also that time in Gambit issue number 10 when Gambit is on their hunt for a special jewel with temporal properties, an artifact which is revealed to be sent to Gambit backwards through time by the Witness himself. Bishop at one point even refers to the Witness as Gambit to his face, a name that the Witness does not deny owning, instead simply replying by calling Bishop Mon Ami. And if you're still not happy with my anti-canonical reasoning, too bad. At number 1, we have the Rex Dogs. If you've got a problem, let me remind you that this list calls for better X-Men, and if you believe that the universe where anthropomorphic canines exist in the place of humans is somehow inferior to the X-Men, then you must be a cat person. You see, the Rex Dogs are leagues better than their human counterparts on numerous fronts. Firstly, the original X-Men are prone to fight amongst themselves, like how Wolverine and Cyclops stick together about as well as two repelling magnets, whereas the Rex Dogs take loyalty to a whole new level. In terms of combat, the X-Men are strictly known for their heroic accomplishments, while on the other hand, not only are the Rex Dogs unafraid of getting their paws dirty, they're also adorable while doing it. Guys, let's face it, it's hard not to love these mutant doggies. The only thing that the X-Men have on the Rex Dogs is opposable thumbs, which are definitely overrated. I mean, come on, Professor Rex is a disabled telepathic chihuahua, for crying out loud.
Number 10, Earth 5 Shazam. Earth 5, or Earth S, is a simpler, kinder world, a world that is more optimistic, a world where the heroes are seen as such with hardly any faults. Basically, this is the golden age of comics, specifically Fawcett Comics. Here, Captain Marvel is the main superhero, which gives the world the name Thunderworld. He and his family, Captain Marvel Jr. and Mary Marvel, keep the world safe from everything from the Monster Society to aliens. I'm talking like Shazam is essentially taking the place of Superman as the premier superhero of Earth. This version of Shazam worked together alongside Superman and Overman to recruit the Supermen of the universe. They all worked together, led by Captain Marvel, to defeat Ultraman and weaken Mandrake, who was killed by the Green Lanterns. Number 9, Red Sun Batman. The Batman appearing in one of the greatest Superman stories ever, Red Sun, is not some crazy powerful amalgamation of characters. In fact, I'd say he's considerably weaker than a number of alternate Batman, but he is still Batman. In this dystopian Earth 30, where Superman became a tool of Stalin and his Soviet Union, Batman has become the most wanted man in Russia. As an adult, he became a blight on the Soviets and terrorized them all for revenge on Pyotr Rozlov, the captain of the police who brought the demise of Bruce's parents. He became an idol for those who wanted to oppose Superman and his regime. Eventually, Rozlov turned on Superman and convinced Batman to take down Superman. So, he stole Wonder Woman and bound her with her own lasso and drew Superman into a trap where he then bombarded the hero with simulated red sunlight. He forced the weakened Superman into a cellar to lock him away forever. But alas, Wonder Woman managed to destroy her lasso and remove the generator powering up the lamps, and unwilling to be locked up and lobotomized, Batman detonated a little boom boom that he'd implanted within his own small intestine. But before he passed away, Batman revealed to Superman the truth of Rozlov's treachery and got his revenge in a really roundabout way. Number 8, Flashpoint Cyborg. When Barry Allen Flash goes back in time to try and save his mom, he royally messes with the timeline, pretty much changing the whole DC universe. In this newly created timeline, Cyborg is America's greatest hero in place of Superman, based out of Detroit. He's the guy, but obviously he doesn't inspire the same kind of confidence as the Man of Steel, because that would just be preposterous. When the Amazons and the Atlanteans go to war, Cyborg tries to gather a group of Earth's superhumans to help stop the conflict in its tracks, but it has already ravaged half of Europe. Thanks to Thomas Wayne, this timeline's Batman, refusing to join up, nobody else wants to join this group either. But then, superstar Barry Allen shows up and convinces Wayne otherwise, and the three set off to gather together an army of heroes. And they do, and it's awesome. Number 7, Dead Earth. Now, I'm not sure what the general consensus on this comic is, and quite frankly, I don't really care because I think this version of Diana of Themyscira is just absolutely insanely awesome. The comic picks up in an apocalyptic wasteland in what used to be Gotham City. Deep down in the remnants of what used to be the Batcave, Wonder Woman had been kept alive in a containment unit and was awoken by a group of humans who were running from a mutated monster known as a Hydra. After saving the humans and liberating their city, she journeys to Themyscira only to find out that the Hydra are actually her fellow Amazons mutated by atomic radiation after the Amazons had decided to go to war with the rest of humanity who had driven the Earth to its breaking point. The world had bombarded Themyscira with nuclear fire, even though Diana used the absolute limits of her abilities to try and stop that. When Superman, who fought for humanity, turned up to try and explain why he couldn't have helped Wonder Woman, we see just how powerful this Wonder Woman is. Losing complete control of herself, Wonder Woman and Superman fought each other to the point of causing a great fire that plunged the world into the apocalypse. And at the end of that fight, Wonder Woman, who was double fisting some kryptonite, brought Superman to his final rest with a hole straight through his chest. She collapsed from exhaustion and forgot everything. So when she learned of this past, Wonder Woman decided to set things right and protected what was left of humanity from what she once called her sisters. Number 6, Injustice Superman. The Superman of the Injustice universe has pretty much the same history as the baseline Superman. But when the Joker kidnaps the pregnant Lois Lane, it lures Superman into a trap of fear gas. In this fear-induced state, Superman hallucinates that his wife is the villain Doomsday and instantly attacks her, flying Lois and what would have been John Kent into space, taking both their lives and also inadvertently causing a nuclear detonation to destroy his city, Metropolis. After losing his city, his wife, and his baby, Superman goes into a pretty understandable rage, bursting into the interrogation room where Batman is learning the true intentions of the Joker, and he just plunges his super fist straight through that clown's chest. Following these events, Superman takes control of the entire Earth and rules it as a tyrant. He turns on and destroys his friends, is manipulated by Wonder Woman, of all people, holds nothing back, and puts the entire Earth under the control of his regime. He is a seriously hardcore version of Superman who has actually been revisited recently in John Kent's comic book story, where he even took the life of Earth 3's Ultraman very easily. It was kinda nuts. Now you may be wondering, how is this guy better than the original? He's not really. It's not the character himself that's better, it's more like the entire story as a whole is just really interesting and compelling, making it awesome to learn more and more about this evil version of Superman. Number 5, Martian Manhunter. Look, I think it's incredibly easy to overlook Martian Manhunter's incredible capabilities. Yes, he is more well known for being a telepath and a shapeshifter, but this guy packs a hell of a punch with the Martian abilities of phasing, Martian vision, and density alteration. In DC 1 Million, we get a version of John Johns, or John Jones, who leads a war against Darkseid and gets him to surrender to the Source Wall, becoming trapped inside of it. The Source Wall, in return, gave John one wish. His wish was to become one with Mars, meaning John became a living planet while maintaining his multiversal telepathy and his genius level intelligence. Now we don't get to see much of this version of John, but we can guess a lot of things about this version. Firstly, his weakness to fire is probably non-existent, because I mean, people gotta make fire on a planet, I guess. We can also probably assume John keeps his other Martians' abilities to a degree, and there's also the possibility that the passage of time has increased those natural abilities considering he's defeated Darkseid. We can also assume that he would now also have the powers that usually come with being a living planet, like weather manipulation and control of the elements, and he can control the sands of Mars to an incredible degree, so there's that too. Number 4, Last Night on Earth, Joker. In Batman Last Night on Earth by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, Batman, or rather a clone of Batman created by Batman's own resurrection machine, goes out into a post-apocalyptic world completely rocked thanks to Lex Luthor. One of the first things that this new Batman finds, funnily enough, is a lantern with the head of the Joker somehow still alive and speaking inside of it. Kind of like in God of War when Kratos gets the head of Mimir that he just carries around on his hip. skip. Batman takes this Joker lantern as a companion, and this talkative Joker keeps the Dark Knight company as he works to find a way to dethrone Omega, who is a villain that rules over the apocalyptic world using Darkseid's Omega effect. This Joker is strangely friendly and compassionate, and he is honestly a great cheerleader for Batman, which I don't think any of us expected to see. What we really didn't expect to see is that this disembodied head is given a robotic body to become Batman's new Robin. What? Number 3, Kingdom Come Shazam. In an alternate possible future, metahumans or superheroes are now hated. Because of this, Billy Batson hasn't become Shazam in years and is now a full-grown man looking a lot like his alter ego minus the cool costume and cape and powers and all that stuff. He was eventually brainwashed by Lex Luthor into believing that metahumans and even Captain Marvel, who lives inside of him, sort of, are all monsters. In time, Bruce Wayne tries to convince Billy otherwise, which eventually forces him to turn to Shazam once more, breaking open the metahuman prison and starting a massive war that puts the world at risk. Now, after a nuclear device was dropped threatening to take out thousands of people, Superman convinced Billy to help, and Shazam outraced Superman to the device using his lightning to destroy it and sacrificing himself to save both humans and metahumans, ending the hatred against superheroes once and for all in this world. Number 2, Bat Prince. Another alternate version of Batman, I know, but he belongs to probably one of my favorite alternate reality stories to come out of DC Comics, Dark Knights of Steel. This story takes place in a world of medieval fantasy, where the Wayne family ruled their kingdom until the mother and father of Superman came to Earth. The L family house became rulers of the land after a horrible attack on the Wayne family. Now, as the surviving son of the Waynes, Bruce serves as both a knight and an adopted son to the L family, with his network of Robins and his super brilliant mind. But as the world is at each other's throats, this Bat Prince learns about the actions that led to his birth and the powers he now possesses as a half-Kryptonian Dark Knight. Dark Knights of Steel that came out last year in 2022 just has so many interesting and fresh takes on classic DC characters. It's fresh and fun and flirty, and I got a variant cover of the first issue and it looks so sweet, and maybe one day I'll get to show you guys. Definitely read Dark Knights of Steel. And finally, into number 1, it's Green Lantern Earth 1. This Green Lantern focused story is one that I actually really like. It brushes over a lot of things very easily, but it made me care about the Green Lanterns, and that's something I didn't think was ever gonna happen. Sorry. It almost feels like a dark sci-fi take on Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns. Essentially, in this story, Hal Jordan is on the moon with a crew of workers who mine for metal when he comes across a crashed alien ship containing the Green Lantern ring, a Green Lantern battery, the corpse of Abin Sur, and a robot called a Manhunter. Hal claimed the ring, just taking it off of the alien corpse, and use it to fight the Manhunter that sprung on him. What had happened is that the Manhunter robots were created by the Guardians of the Universe to take out the Green Lanterns, as the Lanterns had grown uncontrollable, and they were pretty successful, but also grew out of control, putting the galaxy in peril and leaving the Green Lantern core broken and spread extremely thin. Hal meets up with an equally inexperienced Kilowog, and they go across the universe trying to rally together any Green Lanterns they can. It all feels like, the best way I saw it described was as if Christopher Nolan and Ridley Scott teamed up and made a Green Lantern story. It does feel like that, and it's just such a cool and fresh take. Kicking off the list today at number 10 is Lord Iron. Kicking off the list with Marvel 1602, otherwise known as Earth 311. This Earth takes a bunch of the Marvel characters we love and plops them in the Elizabethan era, and yes, that includes Iron Man. Going by the name Anthony Stark, aka Lord Iron, his armor is powered by quote-unquote lightning bottles, and was created when Anthony was captured in the Holy Land during the English-Spanish Wars and treated rather harshly by the Hulk, resulting in the requirement of the suit just to survive. Anthony is sent on a mission to hunt down Banner in the New World with his technologically advanced suit. Now, look, this suit in comparison to other versions of Iron Man is not the most advanced and powerful suit, and you'd expect that from the time period. But when looked at with the scope of the technology at the time, it's centuries ahead of its time, being nearly on par with the base Iron Man armors, only it has a super sweet lightning sword. Number 9. Iron Man 2099. In the dark, ultra-capitalist dystopian society of Marvel 2099, Tony Stark is physically long gone. Instead, it's a guy by the name of Sonny Frisco who takes on the mantle of Iron Man. The technology behind Sonny's advanced suit of armor is a full century ahead of Tony Stark's tech, but despite that, the basic range of powers and abilities are curiously the same. Iron Man 2099 flies around at supersonic speeds and generates powerful energy blasts. Plus, he has a metric butt-ton of firepower and gadgets. What I think makes Sonny Frisco better is that the character actually has an advanced intellect comparable to Tony Stark's, or even better with the knowledge of this future world. Sonny built the suit of armor himself, as any Iron Man worth his salt should, and he earned his place on the Avengers team of 2099 in the process. If you guys have your own favorite alternate Iron Man variants that don't make this list, or you just have ideas for future videos, don't be shy and make sure to drop them down in the comments below. We love to hear from you guys whenever we can. But moving on to number 8, Exiles. Tony Stark, the undisputed monarch of Earth. What? Yes. They take a man with the intelligence, wealth, and power of Anthony Stark and make him unbothered by any kind of sense of morality, and that's a man who can bring the world to its knees. But he also has the sense to not let them know it, and then be begged to take charge. Tony Stark of Earth 42777 acquired every world conglomerate, he organized a mutant war against humanity, and then defeated their leader, Magneto. He created a worldwide famine, the likes of which was never seen before, and then he invented the cures and vaccines to fix it. He then got elected president. He developed weather controlling technologies to create biblical level natural disasters in Europe and Asia, having them beg for help to the point of giving up their own control. Central America and Canada had economic down spirals that brought them into the fold as well, and he made a deal with Dr. Doom, who had attacked the Capitol and taken out all the other Democratic leaders in America. And then he destroyed Doom after receiving a blast to the face that left him disfigured, just like Emperor Palpatine. He's D-Life the Hulk. This version of Tony Stark is ruthless and powerful, and that is why he's on this list. Number 7, Ultimate Universe Iron Man. Having your mind and body altered by an infinity gem sounds like it could go anywhere, but fittingly for Tony Stark, it led to him being able to physically and mentally interact with pretty much any computer ever. And that's a pretty good ability for someone who flies around in a technological suit of armor. The Antonio Stark of Earth 1610, or the Ultimate Universe, has basically become part man, part machine. Kinda like Cyborg, but not really. Being able to project his mind into computers and androids, allowing him to be nigh unkillable, proven when the Master, aka Reed Richards, of this universe seemingly brought his demise, but he became a non-physical entity which could manifest itself via computer systems. When actually physically inhabiting an Iron Man armor, he gains the usual abilities, plus force fields and cloaking, but he's also got nanites in his bloodstream that he uses to control his suits, as well as open locks, defuse little boom booms, and interact with all forms of technology before he gets infused with an Infinity Gem and becomes super cool. Number 6, Iron Hammer. The Iron Man from the 2018 comic book event Infinity Warps blended the characters of Iron Man and Thor to make for one of the most powerful versions of Tony Stark ever. For some backstory, this warp world was created when Gamora gained the power of the Infinity Stones, and she used them to fold the universe in half, merging souls together, creating amalgamated heroes like Stark Odin's son. This awesome version of Iron Man and Thor enjoys virtual immortality thanks to his Asgardian physiology, along with superhuman strength and endurance. His hammer, Mjolnir Iron, I know, stupid name, just go with it, has all the same powers as the regular Mjolnir, but it also grants Stark his armor, which is now a mystical suit of Asgardian armor that does all the same cool things. Since both Thor and Tony kind of had daddy issues, this version of the mix also has their father, Howard Odin, playing a big part in the story too. It's just really awesome. Okay. Number 5, Iron Maniac. Coming at us from the alternate Earth of 5012, the Iron Maniac shows readers what a totally evil version of Tony Stark would look like, other than the Exiles version. That one's also really evil. This Tony Stark from this war-torn version of the Marvel Universe has done some truly horrible things following the loss of so many of his fellow heroes at the hands of a villain named Titanus. Using a really cool armor that also somewhat resembles Doctor Doom's armor, the Iron Maniac went against the Fantastic Four and even took the life of Johnny Blaze in his native universe. His advanced armor repels some magical attacks as well as generates a neural dampening field that mitigates telepathic and telekinetic attacks to some degree, which really helped him out to be absolutely terrible. Reed Richards of Earth 5012 eventually found a way to send this Tony Stark to the 616 universe, where he faced the 616 Fantastic Four and eventually the New Avengers, showing just how powerful this evil Iron Man actually is, and making us thank our stars that normal Tony Stark is a good guy. Number 4. Iron Lantern. The Amalgam Universe combined the world's two biggest comic book companies, DC and Marvel Comics, during a time of utmost peace and prosperity. Just kidding, this was in the 90s. This crazy event pitted popular characters from both sides against each other and even fused some characters together. One incredibly cool amalgamation would be between Iron Man and Green Lantern. Harold Stark, HAL for short, was the founder of Stark Aircraft, and while test flying a prototype aircraft, it suddenly took off on its own to a crashed alien spaceship and it crashed itself yards away. The crash left shards of metal in Stark's chest, which after meeting the dying alien, Roman Sur, Stark survived using an alien battery that suspiciously was in the shape of a lantern to build a suit of armor. This armor not only kept him alive though, it gave him the ability to create green solid energy constructs, fire plasma bolts, fly at speeds beyond the speed of light, time travel, and it granted him almost unlimited telepathic powers. He also had translation of virtually any language, force field generation, and the ever classic superhuman strength and durability. Yeah, he'll put his hand on your chest, like this. He'll go, stop. And then he'll fire a little repulsor beam out. Number 3. Iron Man and Doctor Strange. So it turns out that Tony Stark is a good fit to become the Sorcerer Supreme, and honestly, when you think about the intelligence of the guy, it makes a decent amount of sense. In What If issue number 113 from 1998, Tony Stark and Stephen Strange meet at a party, and after leaving together, Tony is the one driving when they get into the car crash that would normally ruin Strange's hands. Where in the normal continuity, Stephen has to deal with his hands relatively alone, in this What If, it leads Tony on a journey fueled by guilt to try and repair Strange's hands. Eventually, it leads him to the Ancient One, which in turn leads to him becoming the master of the mystic arts, learning how to infuse his tech and armor with magic to create a much more capable hero. As for Stephen though, he becomes almost like Baron Mordo and betrays Stark to Dormammu. Luckily, this isn't a list of better Stephen Strange alternates. Number 2. All New X-Men Annual number 1. But just to hammer home the idea that Stark would make a great Sorcerer Supreme, we actually have more than one alternate reality where this takes place. The second one I want to talk about today would be in All New X-Men Annual number 1 from 2014. This story showed us Iron Man from the temporary reality number of 591. Tony in this reality brought together the Avengers to permanently end the threat of Thanos on the universe, which resulted in the alien races of said universe rewarding the Earth and its heroes with advanced alien technology, turning the Earth into a utopia. Tony himself would start to lean more into his mystical side with all the extra time he had after saving the universe, eventually becoming the Sorcerer Supreme and being able to solve further conflicts without needing any kind of real fighting. Now last I've seen, this Tony was living youthfully comfortable at 126 years old. There are even more versions of Sorcerer Tonys out in the multiverse, but you can go find them yourself, because I'm done. After this number 1 point, Robert Downey Jr. Look, we can talk about magical Iron Mans all day, but nothing can really stand up to the closest thing we got to a real Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Tony Stark was the whole groundwork for the MCU, and his character endured for years. Taking aspects of the original character and adding some realism and a really likable performance made for a version of Iron Man that boosted up not only the comic book character's popularity, but through the MCU, it boosted up the popularity of comic books in general, general, and for us here at Top 10 Nerd, that is quite a statement. Being in a world that is a bit more grounded and relatable to our own, this Iron Man doesn't have as complex of a story, nor is he more powerful as his comic book counterpart, but he is more than impressive enough without that. Not to mention, he was the one to actually defeat Thanos in the end. His send-off from the MCU affected people who don't even read comic books, and I think that says a lot. Number 10, intelligent design god Hulk. What if Planet Hulk? Most comic book readers, and especially fans of Marvel and the Hulk specifically, know of the storyline where the Illuminati banished the Hulk from Earth to send him to another planet. He ended up crash landing on Sakaar and becoming a gladiator turned liberator turned ruler of the planet until his ship self-destructed, taking out his family and bringing him back to Earth with a vengeance that no guilty person was safe from. What if Planet Hulk ends up asking the question, what if the Illuminati's banishment had hit its original target? In this story, Hulk lands on an incredibly peaceful and serene planet instead of Sakaar. And sure, he goes a bit ragey at first, but he eventually realizes the planet is inhabited by a race of peaceful creatures. Over long periods of time, the Hulk helps this race to evolve and become a thriving civilization. They end up viewing the Hulk as their god, and he basically acts as one that leads them to wealth and prosperity. It's one of the few Hulk stories that doesn't end in tears, and I'm more than happy to talk about it for that reason alone. Number 9, Dark Claw. So, what happens if you take Logan Howlett and Bruce Wayne and just mash them up together? You subtract Robins, add some Canada, carry the two, and you'll find you get Logan Wayne. This awesome character is from the Amalgam universe of Earth 9602. Now obviously, Bruce Wayne has no actual powers of his own unless you count his undeniable skill. So most of the abilities belonging to Logan Wayne come from his Wolverine half. A massively powerful regenerative healing factor, slowed aging, superhuman senses, plus his healing factor and adamantium skeleton allow him to have a degree of super strength. But thanks to his Wayne half of things, Dark Claw is a master detective and master of martial arts, stealth, acrobatics, and intimidation. After he witnessed the passing of his parents, Logan went to live with his uncle up in Alberta, Canada, who then also lost his life to poachers. So yes, it's still as dark as both Bruce and Logan's backstories. He then went to kick it with some nuns and then joined up with the Canadian Air Force. At some point, he joined the Weapon X program and learned of his mutation and gained his claws alongside his incredibly dangerous rival, Creed H. Quinn, who would become a saber-toothed Joker hybrid named Hyena. Logan Wayne would go back to New Gotham City where he decided to avenge his parents' and uncle's deaths by donning the costume and name of Dark Claw. If you like this list so far, make sure to drop a like, and to check out part 1 where we covered 10 more awesome Marvel variants better than the originals. Number 8, Earth Ascani Apocalypse. As some of you may know, Apocalypse and the mutant Nathan Summers, aka Cable, have a lot of history together. When Nathan was a freshly born little bean, he was infected with the techno-organic virus by Apocalypse as a test of his worthiness to become a host for Apocalypse. When the X-Men fought off Apocalypse and recovered Nathan, Cyclops begrudgingly agreed to send Nathan away to the future with the hope of him being cured. Earth 4932, or Earth Ascani, is that future. Taking place in the late 36th century, where Apocalypse ruled the entire Earth, when Nathan arrived, he was immediately cloned just in case he could not be saved. When this Apocalypse found out that Nathan was in the present, he sent out his forces to capture Nathan, but he had actually taken the clone instead. That clone would be raised up by Apocalypse with the hopes of him becoming the next host body for Apocalypse himself. Apocalypse named this clone Strife after a villain who fought him in the modern day, who was actually an adult Strife, which really confuses things, doesn't it? Since his current body had grown old and feeble, Apocalypse raised Strife to be extremely powerful as he planned to transfer his consciousness and power into Strife's body. Now, the real Nathan, who was being raised to be Cable by Jean Grey and Cyclops in this future world, ended up disrupting Apocalypse's plan, with the teenage Cable defeating this old and decrepit Apocalypse in combat. Number 7, Netflix Punisher. We have had 3 movies of debatable quality that have brought Franken-Castle, the Punisher, to the screen. And while Ray Stevenson, rest in peace, and Thomas Jane, and I guess Dolph Lundgren did decent jobs as Franken-Castle, when Jon Bernthal showed up as the Punisher in the 2nd season of Netflix's acclaimed Daredevil show, he did it better than anyone before him. Or at least for For me, he did. It was the most believable version of the Punisher I had ever seen. Bernthal brought fury and intensity at all times, almost to the point of seeming positively insane, especially when compared with the morals of Matt Murdock, Daredevil. His character was also incredibly capable and brutal, as is necessary for the Punisher to even work in real life. When he got his own show in 2017, it brought everything to just a whole different level, telling a conspiracy story that also took a very interesting and pretty real look at PTSD in soldiers, while also bringing the right amount of brutality that you'd expect from a Punisher story. Even my mom liked this show, and she doesn't even read comics. That's the highest praise I know how to give. Number 6, Wagnerin. The Legion of Night comes from a world where Mr. Sinister corrupted the genomes of those who underwent the mutant resurrection protocols on Krakoa. Because of this, Sinister's control over humanity and mutantdom became supreme. One of his experiments was combining the genetics of different mutants to create powerful chimeras to serve him, and it made for some crazy awesome comic book moments. A particularly special project was turning the genes of Nightcrawler into a band of teleporting assassins. But the Legion of Night, while having leadership in the form of Sinister's female clone, Mother Righteous, also had field leaders. One of which was the mutant Banshee possessed by the spirit of variance called Vox Ignis, and the other was Mr. Sinister's favorite Nightcrawler chimera, Wagnerin. Mixing the DNA of both Nightcrawler and Wolverine, Wagnerin, funnily enough, was more of a mix of Laura Kinney, X-23, and Nightcrawler, and she made for an excellent assassin and leader for Mother Righteous once she had been freed from the control of Mr. Sinister. Wagnerin ended up beating the odds and procreated with the Cyclops Nightcrawler, aka Summer Night, to create a golden mutant teleporter who seemingly teleported to a random location immediately after her birth, causing Summer Night to lose control of himself and fall victim to the influence of Sinister once again. Eventually, it was revealed that Mother Righteous had actually taken the child, and when that was revealed to Wagnerin, she defected. Now 900 years later, she was finally able to bring down Mother Righteous and go on to try and live a life with her golden little baby. Number 5, Ultimate Spider-Man. The Ultimate Spider-Man comic run is considered by a lot of people to be one of the absolute best Spider-Man runs ever. Being one of the best things to come from writer Brian Michael Bendis, Ultimate Spider-Man revamped the origin of the Spider-Man character for modern audiences in the 2000s, but also made Peter Parker even younger. The story follows the original story pretty closely, with only minor tweaks and changes that make it even better, like the fixes made to the Clone Saga story, or even the changes made to the Venom symbiote. The Earth 1610 comic book run had one writer at the helm, which really helped to maintain consistency throughout the story, whereas Earth 616's Amazing Spider-Man carried on for 50 years and had many writers coming in to build the story, unfortunately giving it areas that kind of lacked to some degree. Ultimate Spider-Man took a great idea and then ran with it, building up an incredible cast of characters and injecting a great deal of emotion and heart into the story as it took familiar ideas in crazy new directions. Number 4, Ultimate Loki. Loki Laufey-san in the main Marvel universe is a pretty dastardly devil. He's always got schemes on schemes and is just doing what gods of mischief best, using his sorcery. But he's also somewhat redeemable. The Loki Odin-son of Marvel's Ultimate Universe, however, is kind of just a madman, but one with the ability to warp reality. He could retcon history into anything he desired by either creating events that never happened or erasing events as if they never happened. He could create copies of himself, change the color of the skies, render himself near impervious to harm, even from Thor's hammer, and summon armies of monsters. One of the first things this Loki does while a member of the Warriors 3 alongside Thor and their brother Balder is visit his giantess mother, steal the Norn stones, and completely take the life of his brother Balder. He then took on the guise of Baron Zemo during World War II and led an attack on Asgard with frost giants and some super soldier Germans that he created. This got him banished to the room without doors, just like he planned. He was eventually freed from the room, and unlike his brothers who had been reborn as mortal men, Loki was still a god, and an incredibly powerful one. He would be one of the main threats faced by the Ultimates when they formed up, but was eventually depowered by Odin. Number 3, Spider-Man 2099. Instead of getting bitten by a radioactive super spider, Miguel O'Hara's DNA was biologically mixed with a spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly hooked on a not far off future substance by his own employer. If that sounds convoluted, well, Yeah, but it also sounds right at home in a comic book. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel was still granted many of the same abilities at a pretty similar level. One thing that differs largely is Miguel's spider sense. He doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses similar to someone like Daredevil or Wolverine. Miguel also has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him. For example, he possesses an incredible level of super speed as well as telepathic communication abilities, both of which are really freaking cool. He also has fangs and claws on his fingers and toes that he can use in combat. On top of all those powers though, Miguel is from the year 2099, which means that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal. But it's not just his powers that make him better. The Spider-Man 2099 story is awesome, but you'll have to do the reading to figure that out for yourself. Number 2, Tony Stark, Sorcerer Supreme. In all new X-Men Annual Number 1 from 2014, Marvel gave us a version of Tony Stark Iron Man from the temporary reality number of 591. Tony in this reality successfully brought together the Avengers to permanently end the threat of Thanos on the universe. Because of the Avengers accomplishing that insane feat of strength and saving the entire universe from the threat of Thanos, alien races of said universe rewarded the Earth and its heroes with advanced alien technology, allowing the Earth to become a utopia. Tony himself would start to lean more into his mystical side with all the extra time he had after saving the universe, eventually becoming the Sorcerer Supreme and being able to solve further conflicts without needing to do any kind of real fighting. Last I heard, this Tony was living youthfully comfortable at 126 years old. This isn't the only Tony to become the Sorcerer Supreme, but he is certainly one of the most accomplished. Number 1, Earth X Venom. In the alternate future of Earth 999, basically every single person has powers. Things have gone apocalyptic, and in an act of vengeance, the Venom symbiote bonded to the daughter of Peter Parker, May Parker. While her retired and cynical pops ain't too thrilled about it, May does actually have complete control over the symbiote thanks to her advanced and honed spider sense, which was something the symbiote was never expecting to happen. Venom and her father Spider-Man go on to join the superpowered police force and fight crime and supervillain threats together. She eventually, after the death of Death itself, goes on to be recruited by Kang the Conqueror as part of a multiversal team to fight the Apocalypse twins. In addition to her proportional spider powers, plus the enhanced spider sense, she gains all the usual symbiote powers plus a few extra, like what seems to be a rudimentary form of telepathy, and it is believed her symbiote could go on to mutate further to gain even more powers, which is a good way for Marvel to say, we can do whatever we want with this character. She's one of the coolest looking versions of Venom while also being one of the most capable. Coming in at number 10 is the Maker. Despite his heroics in the 616 universe, we got to witness a spectacular fall from grace for the Reed Richards of the Ultimate Comics universe, otherwise known as Earth 1610. The Magneto of this universe unleashed the Ultimatum Wave, which caused a tidal wave that took out thousands of people. That event, combined with the stress of the Fantastic Four breaking up and Sue Storm rejecting his marriage proposal, caused Reed Richards to completely snap and blow up his childhood home. He went on to use aliens under his control to attack the heroes and was eventually defeated and disfigured by the Human Torch and flung into the negative zone. Reed somehow returned to Earth and took on the identity of the Maker and set out on a twisted quest to make the world his idea of perfect. He destroyed all the Asgardians in an attempt to understand Thor's power and launched an attack on Washington, D.C. The Maker then went on to do a lot of really twisted stuff, fighting the heroes of his own Earth as well as the heroes of Earth 616, proving that if not kept in check by a strong moral compass, Mr. Fantastic's amazing mind can be ultimately a source of terror. And now, he's literally recreating the Ultimate Universe by manipulating the timeline of another universe. Number 9, Ghost Spider. Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider, is Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's first love interest, but from the alternate reality of Earth 65. In this reality, Gwen Stacy is bitten by the spider, granting her powers and keeping Peter Parker as some nerd, but also her initial love interest. Gwen was granted superhuman strength, speed, toughened flesh, and pretty much all the spider-based powers that the regular Spider-Man would possess. Where she differs in a pretty big way is that after Gwen is depowered, she instead successfully bonds with the Venom symbiote. Gwen learned to find a healthy balance balance with the symbiote. When she first bonded with Venom, thanks to a Matt Murdock version of Kingpin, she was rage-fueled and looking for revenge, but over time, she realized that she needed to control that and give Venom better qualities to enhance in order to find balance with the symbiote. In a way, Venom and Gwen became even greater heroes, helping each other out. Number 8. King Thor. It goes without saying that Thor, Odin's son, being a literal god, has an incredibly long lifespan. His father Odin is millions of years old, and Thor is meant to eventually exceed his dad as the new Allfather. In the alternate timeline of Earth 14412, he successfully does that. During the War of the Realms in this universe, Thor sacrificed his eye to obtain the knowledge to defeat Malekith the Accursed and was made Allfather of Asgard. Now at some point, Thor eventually left Asgard and joined Omnipotent City's Ministry of Interdeity Justice, meaning Thor became a cosmic god cop, preventing wars among various pantheons and arresting gods that broke their godly laws. After spending some time as a sentient planet, assisting Sorcerer Supreme Daemon Hellstrom, surviving in the frozen jungles of Jotunheim, falling in love with a frost giant, and having a few kids, Thor returned to Asgard and inherited the power of the Allfather from Odin, renaming it the Thor Force. It was after all those countless years that Thor's brother Loki instigated the annihilation of all life on Earth just out of spite. But Thor still carried on, with the loss of his friends and comrades causing Thor to become a stern and cynical ruler, just like Odin was before him. Funnily enough, Wolverine also survived this long as well. I don't know how, but he did. Number 7. General James Howlett. Speaking of Wolverine, in the second volume of Extreme X-Men, joining a team of multi-dimensional mutants that hunt down evil Professor Xaviers across dimensions is a much different version of Wolverine. Hailing from the reality of Earth 12025, this version of our feral mutant is the Governor General of the Dominion of Canada and Viceroy of Her Majesty's expedition to Shangri-La. He is like a version of Wolverine who is also mixed with President Theodore Roosevelt. General James Howlett is an adventurer and hero alongside his partner and lover, the demigod Hercules, or Heracles, however you want to say it. These two shared a love that was built after years and years of working together, and their bond was so strong that Hercules gave James a super cool upgrade in the form of a skeleton made of adamantine, which is a godly golden metal even stronger than adamantium, making Wolverine completely indestructible and immune to telepathic attacks. Unfortunately though, due to the god-on-mortal nature of the relationship, the Greek gods banished the pair to Tartarus, where they basically just fight hordes and hordes of lost and damned souls for 4 years before escaping. Number 6. Doctor Strange Fate. Doctor Strange Fate is the only amalgam character from the DC Marvel Amalgam universe who understood the mashed up nature of said universe, and he also survived its destruction, meaning he survived the alienation of the two biggest comic book companies, which is impressive to say the least. With the combined might of two magical masters of the mystic arts, Marvel's Doctor Strange and DC's Doctor Fate, combined with a little extra Marvel's Professor X special sauce, Amalgam's Charles Xavier toes the line between hero and villain to protect his universe. After saving Nabu, the Ancient One, Xavier was trained in the mystic and martial arts. In addition to being the world's supreme sorcerer, Strange Fate was also the world's most powerful telepath, putting him at a crazy level of power, and he was even able to sneak into Strange's consciousness and convince Doctor Strange to recreate the Amalgam universe as a pocket dimension. Number 5. Old Man Logan. In the alternate universe where we are introduced to Old Man Logan and Old Man Hawkeye, everything is in shambles. It's an apocalyptic wasteland, and all because the villains, under the leadership of the Red Skull, had coordinated a massive attack on the world's superheroes, leaving only a very, very few alive. Logan himself was tricked into wiping out every single member of the X-Men, and while that is tragic, I do have to say it's incredibly impressive. Impressive or not though, it drove Logan mad with grief and he vowed to become a pacifist. He retired to a quiet farming family life, letting the world go to hell around him. But we need a story, so that cannot fly. Eventually being short on money and needing to help his family, he joins Hawkeye on an adventure across America to deliver a briefcase of super soldier serum. After he goes on this grand adventure, defeats the Red Skull and returns home, the Hulk gang had completely wiped out his family. This is when he finally gets to pop his claws for the first time since the story begins. He wipes out the entire gang and eviscerates the Hulk himself, and then eventually finds his way to the main Marvel universe. Another version of him even gets the powers of Venom as well, which is super cool. Number 4, Age of Apocalypse Nightcrawler. In the Age of Apocalypse, Nightcrawler is very similar to his Earth 616 counterpart, except he's an incredibly capable warrior brandishing dual blades at all times, and he isn't really as lovable as he would be normally. This Nightcrawler hates the church, having had a traumatic experience when he was younger, which is a far cry from the original Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler in this universe is also close to his mother, Mystique, which is why he gladly takes on the Darkholme last name. This Nightcrawler believes his biological father is Sabretooth, since Mystique stated that she had gone to the trouble of, quote, finding a father with fur when Nightcrawler complains he is cold. This version of Nightcrawler actually chooses to remain in the main 616 reality and joins up with X-Force. But being on Earth 616, he does get mistaken for the original Nightcrawler, which he does not appreciate. Like at one point, he even pushes Kitty Pryde for mistaking him for a resurrected Nightcrawler. Now while working with X-Force, he has successfully took out his reality's Blob by teleporting a shark into his stomach, which devoured Blob from the inside out, which is terrifying, and Iceman, who he led into a factory boiler room, where I guess you can imagine what happened next. Number 3, Ghost Panther. Ghost Panther from Marvel's Warp World is a combination of the Wakandan prince T'Challa, aka Black Panther, and the demonic spirit of vengeance, Ghost Rider. This combination is perfect to explore a new aspect of culture meeting mythology, which is the excuse we're gonna go with to justify a hellfire skeleton that rides a giant fiery panther. Don't you dare look at me and tell me that this is not amazing. Don't you dare. In this story, T'Challa was exiled from Wakanda for his arrogance and came to America, becoming a stunt rider named Johnny Blaze, which is very original. After an accident leaves him fighting for his life, a demon offers him his life in exchange for becoming the all-powerful Ghost Panther. In case you don't realize why this is awesome, let me reiterate that this is King T'Challa as a hellfire-wielding spirit of vengeance riding on top of a hellfire-covered panther. Need I say more? Number 2, Punisher Max. Punisher Max was an adult comic, and for a guy whose main thing is ushering people to the pearly gates, it makes sense that this setting suits his character best. Removing the Punisher from all the costumes and superpowers of the regular Marvel universe and dropping him right into an America facing the early days of the War on Terror, it kicked off with the CIA trying to recruit Frank, which sets off a violent political game. This Franken-Castle was a veteran of the Cold War, running Black Ops alongside Nick Fury in Vietnam, and he is not someone you want to mess around with. Like, he lights out Microchip during the first storyline just for helping the CIA to even find Punisher. His enemies here are also much more threatening and scarily realistic compared to anything that Earth 616 has thrown at the Punisher, with a big shout out to Barracuda specifically. Another former soldier just as ruthless and skilled as Frank is. Punisher Max shows the very real physical and emotional damage that Franken-Castle's crusade would cause him in real life, obviously with a tiny suspension of disbelief that comes with it being a comic book. If you choose to give it a read, just be warned, it is extremely graphic. Number 1, End of Time Doom. Earth 14412 is home to a variant of Doctor Doom who refers to himself as the Fist of Iron, the Starbrand Supreme, and the Master of Mystic Vengeance. This is End of Time Doom. In this reality, King Loki had destroyed all of humanity, with Doom being one of the few survivors. This gave Doom the opportunity to infuse himself with the powers of Iron Fist, Starbrand, the Sorcerer Supreme, and Ghost Rider, making him practically a god. King Thor and his 3 daughters, the Goddesses of Thunder, restored life to the Earth, and Doom showed up conveniently to conquer it. He completely owned the 3 daughters of Old King Thor, and he was only stopped when Old King Thor, who wielded the Thor Force, was also empowered by the Phoenix Force. It's such an epic version of Doctor Doom, of which there are honestly very many, but this one is my favorite. Kicking off the list at number 10 is Spider-Man Punisher. Yes, I am sort of cheating for this one. On Earth 71928, location of the What If Peter Parker Became the Punisher story, Peter Parker, well, becomes the Punisher. It's in the title. On the night Uncle Ben's life was drawn to a close, instead of following the classic story, Peter caught and dispatched the killer using the same weapon that took his uncle's life. From that moment, Peter tried to avoid going full murderous Punisher at first, but having taken the first step and knowing how much more permanent of a solution it is to just take them out, he went full force into that lifestyle. He carried the iron that took Uncle Ben's life, as well as a large assortment of other weaponry, including his web shooters with multiple different types of ammunition that allowed him to take down the Sinister Six with ease, and he was even able to save Gwen Stacy. So technically, this Punisher was not only better than Punisher, but also a more effective crime fighter than Spider-Man himself, in a way. Number 9, Punisher 2099. In the far-flung future of the year 2099, Franken-Castle was long gone. So, Jake Gallows took up the fight. Jake was an officer of the Public Eye Police Force. In an attack ordered by Kron Stone, the Venom of 2099, Jake lost his mother, brother, and sister-in-law, while also being gravely injured himself. Being inspired by the war journals of Franken-Castle, after his recovery, Jake became the new Punisher, taking up the crusade on crime after getting his revenge on Venom. Jake specifically sought out justice for the poor, using his 2099 technology alongside modern and futuristic weaponry to operate as a vigilante before serving as Victor Von Doom's Minister of Punishment. You'll see him most recently in the recent Savage Avengers comics, but no spoilers, so sorry. Number 8, Punisher Noir. The 2009 Noir series from Marvel Comics saw several heroes existing in the Prohibition era post-World War I. Kicking off with the hit of Spider-Man Noir, other characters like Iron Man, Daredevil, the X-Men, and of course, the Punisher soon followed. In this timeline, Frank Castiglione Sr. was a hero of World War I, who had a huge skull tattoo on his chest as a means of intimidating his German opponents in the trenches. And he was also like an American James Bond style hero going on missions against the Russians and Germans. Unfortunately though, when he returns from the war, he finds himself dispatched from life because of his previous government missions. I bet you thought he would be the Punisher here, huh? Well, you're wrong, because after finding his father's arsenal, Frank Jr. wears a skull emblazoned balaclava and hunts down his father's executioners, who turn out to be Noir versions of Jigsaw, Bullseye, and Barracuda, before a final run-in with a fan favorite, the Russian. While some of the Noir characters missed the mark in my eyes, Punisher Noir is actually pretty great. Number 7, 5 Ronin. While we're on the topic of historical versions of Franken-Castle, I have to mention one of my favorite little stories. 5 Ronin from 2011 moves the Marvel Universe back in time to ancient feudal Japan, with 5 issues each focusing on samurai versions of the Punisher, the Hulk, Deadpool, Psylocke, and Wolverine. It is so cool. Each character gets a short standalone story where all of them eventually encounter the wandering Deadpool, who narratively links them all together for us. This version of the Punisher shows him returning to Japan from war in Korea to find a rival has taken the opportunity to take away his family and claim his land. As is usually the case with Franken-Castle, or in this world, Akagi, this leads to some ruthless revenge. Wielding a katana and a big old blunderbuss that I forget the name of, Samurai Frank brings a decided end to anyone that attempts to cross his path during his quest for vengeance. Number 6, Franken-Castle. After he was taken off the board by Daken on orders from Norman Osborn during the Dark Reign event, Franken-Castle, yes, the Punisher, was revived by the Legion of Monsters as an undead zombie-like monster known as Franken-Castle. The Legion resurrected Frank to recruit him in their fight against the villain known as Hellsguard, who was systematically taking out monsters using samurai-like assassins. Although he originally refused to help them, Frank got involved after seeing some innocent little monsters being dispatched too, and that is not something Frank is willing to abide. He went on to slay hordes of Hellsguard's men. It's honestly an incredibly interesting moment in Franken-Castle's history, and it got this version of Frank moved to Earth 666. He also nearly enacted revenge against Daken, being stopped by Wolverine before he was returned to his human form through the Bloodstone. But he kept going on in 666, and it's really cool. Number 5, Marvel Universe versus the Punisher. In this universe, the Punisher interrupts an arms deal involving what he thinks is a briefcase nuke, only to discover that it is in fact a man-made virus that, for Franken-Castle, makes him immune to infection, illness, and disease. That's pretty good, but it didn't quite do this for everyone else though. Problem here is that the chemical weapon found its way into the water supply and then into the food and started in New York, spreading to the whole world through infected travelers. And then it started turning people and heroes into starting with Spider-Man. An outbreak spread and led to insane events, including a war against the cannibals, who then became the dominant beings of this earth. But the real star of the show is Franken-Castle, the Punisher. This is one of the greatest and most brutal Punisher stories ever. It plays on many of his character's flaws and strengths, but the story also shows him defeating so many different heroes who you and I have always wanted to see him face, and who we doubt he would actually be able to defeat, but he does it anyways. It's also a surprisingly deep story that has a ton of awesome moments. Definitely check it out. Number 4, Cosmic Ghost Rider. In the Thanos Wins story arc from writers Donny Cates and Jeff Shaw from Thanos Volume 2, one hero who ended up surviving the attack on the Earth by an alternate timeline Thanos was actually Franken-Castle, but he did it in a bit of a different way. Frank was hit with debris and actually passed on pretty easily during the final stand against Thanos on Earth. Definitely a lame way to go. So once Frank made it to Hell, he made a deal with Mephisto to return to Earth for vengeance, and he was given the power to do just that as the Ghost Rider, the spirit of vengeance. Unfortunately, when this new Ghost Rider showed back up on Earth, everything was already lost. Being completely alone in the ruins of Earth, Frank went completely insane. Eventually, as he does, Galactus showed up, and being the only Earthling left alive, and a very powerful one at that, Frank made a deal. Galactus was allowed to have the Earth if Galactus made Frank his new herald, granting Frank the power cosmic as well as the spirit of vengeance. These two spent hundreds of years together until Thanos completely flattened Galactus. Then, Frank became King Thanos' #1 dude, going on time-hopping adventures and being completely awesome. Number 3, Space Punisher. In 2012, Marvel showed us a very different version of Franken-Castle when they released a 4-issue run called Space Punisher. The series is nuts, super colorful, and heavily inspired by the pulpy sci-fi of the 1950s. There's an awesome robotic sidekick, insane versions of Marvel superheroes and supervillains, including an absolutely monstrous and terrifying version of the Hulk, but it's all centered around a ponytailed, laser sword, blaster-wielding version of the Punisher who finds himself facing space werewolves, space fascists, and space supervillains. It is worth noting, however, that this little weird Punisher story was divisive as hell. Very different from anything before it, Space Punisher was unique to say the least, but it's a comic book. If you can get past the weirdness, it's kind of enjoyable. Number 2, Netflix. We have had 3 movies of debatable quality that have brought Franken-Castle to the screen, and while Ray Stevenson and Thomas Jane, and I guess Dolph Lundgren did decent jobs as Franken-Castle, when Jon Bernthal showed up as the Punisher in the 2nd season of Netflix's acclaimed Daredevil show, he did it better than anyone before him. Or, at least for me, it was the most believable version of the Punisher I had ever seen on a screen. Bernthal brought fury and intensity at all times, almost to the point of seeming positively insane, especially when compared with the morals of Matt Murdock. His character was also incredibly capable and brutal, as is necessary for the Punisher to work. When he got his own show in 2017, it brought everything to a whole different level, telling a conspiracy story that also took a really good look at PTSD in soldiers, while also bringing the right amount of brutality that you'd expect from a Punisher story. Even my mom liked this show, and she doesn't even read comics. That's the highest praise I know how to give. And coming in at number 1, Punisher Max. Punisher Max was an adult comic, and for a guy whose main thing is ushering people to the pearly gates, it makes sense that this setting suits his character best. Removing the Punisher from all the costumes and superpowers of the regular Marvel universe and dropping him right into an America facing the early days of the War on Terror, it kicked off with the CIA trying to recruit Frank, which sets off a hugely violent political game. This Franken-Castle was a veteran of the Cold War, running Black Ops alongside Nick Fury in Vietnam, and he is not someone you want to mess around with. Like, he lights out Microchip during the first storyline just for helping the CIA to even find Franken-Castle. His enemies here are also much more threatening and scarily realistic compared to anything that Earth-616 has thrown at the Punisher. With a big shout out to Barracuda specifically, another former soldier just as ruthless and skilled as Frank is. Punisher Max shows the very real physical and emotional damage that Franken-Castle's crusade would cause him in real life. Obviously with a tiny suspension of disbelief that comes with a comic book. If you choose to give it a read, just be warned that it is extremely graphic and you shouldn't read it unless you're over the age of like I'd say 18. Kicking off the list at number 10 is the Doom above all. Dr. Doom, being one of the most popular Marvel supervillains, has a vast array of alternate Earth variants that are wildly powerful. The Doom above all isn't really above them all. We have seen other more powerful Dr. Dooms like the God King Doom or Doom Supreme, but the Doom above all has just had some awesome moments. His history was extremely similar to that of regular Dr. Doom until Loki wiped out all life on Earth 14412. But this is Dr. Doom we're talking about. Doom wanted to grant himself all the powers of the prehistoric Avengers, and so he did, obtaining the Starbrand, Iron Fist, the Eye of Agamotto, and Cloak of Levitation, and becoming a Spirit of Vengeance. This Doom basically became a god and was able to survive for eons and eons until Thor Odin's son had become the All-Father, grown old like Odin, had 3 granddaughters, and restored life back to the Earth. Now that life had been restored, this Dr. Doom came to claim the planet with a team of massive monsters like Fing Fang Foom and Goom, and he comes into battle with Old King Thor and an Old Man Wolverine with the powers of the Phoenix. Eventually, Logan sacrifices himself to grant Thor the Phoenix Force as well, and then Thor and this Dr. Doom fought each other inside the Earth for like 90 years until Thor came out on top. But then, even though this Doom lost, he then became a living planet as well, and he was among the many Doom variants who worked alongside Doom Supreme in the Avengers Forever storyline. Number 9. Ultimate Green Goblin. If you thought Norman Osborn was a malicious evil little sucker in the regular Marvel Universe, well, apparently he's like that everywhere, including on Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe. Except here, when Osborn tried to create the Goblin formula, it gave him the ability to turn into a massive, hulking green goblin monster, eventually at will. When he was the Goblin, Norman was even more superhumanly strong than he is in other universes. He could run faster than cars, was highly durable, and could launch literal balls of fire and energy, and could even absorb fire and energy from other attacks, like when the Human Torch's Nova Flame just made the Green Goblin even more powerful. If it wasn't for the fact that he was a complete and utter monster set on destroying everything that Peter Parker held dear, this Green Goblin monster would be kinda cool. Like, in a good guy kinda sense, kinda cool. If that makes sense. The thing with this Goblin over the 616 version, other than a massively expanded power set, is that he actually succeeded in his mission. He successfully caused the passing of Peter Parker, while 616 Osborn was successful with a number of his schemes, but I don't believe he ever actually truly beat Peter Parker. Not really. Number 8. King Killmonger. The Destroyer armor is something that I always forget exists. It only appears every now and then, and it's always a huge deal when it does, but I am so used to it only appearing in Asgardian related stories, so needless to say, when it showed up being retrofitted for the Black Panther villain Killmonger in Avengers Forever as part of the Multiversal Masters of Evil, I was more than happy to be taken by surprise. We get a better picture of this villain's story in issue number 6 of Avengers Forever. When T'Challa was still just a wee babby, this Killmonger the Destroyer destroyed Wakanda, single-handedly putting the Wakandan gods under his thumb and turning the country's warriors to ash. Killmonger was traveling the multiverse from Earth to Earth, Wakanda to Wakanda, destroying every version of T'Challa that he could find, except for the one that would escape to become the Sky Spider, the Vibranium Man, and eventually the Star Panther. King Killmonger would travel on his ship alongside his War Panther mercenaries, using his Destroyer armor to level entire cities and entire planets. As part of the Masters of Evil, he was a pretty intimidating foe. Number 7. Ultimate Universe Loki. Loki, Laufey's son in the main Marvel Universe, is a pretty dastardly devil. He's always got schemes on schemes and is just doing what gods of mischief do best, using his sorcery. But he's also somewhat redeemable. The Loki, Odin's son of Marvel's Ultimate Universe, on the other hand, is kinda just a madman, but one with the ability to warp reality. He could retcon history into anything he desired by either creating events that never happened or erasing events as if they never happened. He could create copies of himself, change the color of the skies, render himself near impervious to harm even from Thor's hammer, and summon armies of monsters. Now one of the first things this Loki does while a member of the Warriors 3 alongside Thor and their brother Balder is visit his giantess mother, steal the Norn Stones, and completely take the life of Balder. He then took on the guise of Baron Zemo during World War II and led an attack on Asgard with frost giants, Germans, and some super soldier Germans that he created. This got him banished to the room without doors. But that's just what he planned from the start. He was eventually freed from the room, and unlike his brothers who had been reborn as mortal men, Loki was still a god, and an incredibly powerful one at that. He would be one of the main threats faced by the Ultimates when they formed, but was eventually depowered by Odin because it's Odin. He's just over the top. But speaking of Odin, number 6, Ultron with the power of Odin. Ultron is one of the many examples of why the idea of artificial intelligence is so scary. He has become almost completely unstoppable, and in Ultron Forever, which was an arc that took place during Original Sin, Ultron gets himself an unexpected level of power. The arc features the present-day Black Widow and Vision being transported to the 25th century. In this timeline, a strain of Ultron known as Ultimate Ultron was able to defeat and dispatch the Avengers, eventually turning the heroes and anyone who tried to resist into cyborgs, like unwilling servants, or into his own AI Avengers. But if that ain't enough on its lonesome, Ultron found a way to claim the powers of Odin and become the king of Asgard, while also wielding the Infinity Stones. Needless to say, this version of Ultron from the future is more than just a threat. He's scary, and I don't like it. Number 5, the Batman Who Laughs. While the Batman Who Laughs was Bruce Wayne from Earth -22 of the Dark Multiverse, he basically becomes the most powerful alternate version of the Joker. Everything about this Batman remained relatively the same until the day the Joker found out he was going to pass away, and he decided to take everyone else with him. Joker took down a large number of Batman's rogues gallery, including Catwoman. He caused the passing of Commissioner Gordon, and he paralyzed Batman, forcing the Dark Knight to watch as the Joker took the lives of innocent people. Now, once Batman regained his movement, he lost it and put the Joker to rest. As his one last sick joke though, a toxin in the Joker's heart escaped his body, infecting Batman and turning him into the most terrifying Joker-Batman hybrid that we've ever seen. With all the intelligence and physical ability of Batman mixed with the insanity and psychosis of the Joker, the Batman Who Laughs is off the chain. He has a book on how to destroy the multiverse, as well as a real-world comic book that lays out the structure of the universe. He has a pack of metal cards that can warp reality. He has a pack of feral Jokerized Robins and can corrupt people to his side with his Joker toxin, like Shazam as an example. He wiped out all the heroes of his universe and several others and put together a squad of evil Batman who he used to become one of the biggest threats in the multiverse. Scary, not fun. Number 4, Mazaz. When we first ever meet Mazaz, he is described as the most powerful superhero on Earth 3, the home of the sinister JLA, the Crime Syndicate of America. He was for a long time the biggest threat the Crime Syndicate of America ever faced, and he has taken the lives of a lot of the CSA's members using his superpowers. So this Alexander Luthor was just a regular guy, as much as a Luthor can be, until at some point in his life he figured out how to take the powers of superpowered beings. It seems that the first person who lost their power and their life to Alexander was Will Batson, Earth 3's Billy Batson, which gave Alexander the powers of Mazaz, to call down dark lightning, transforming him into a more masculine being with superhuman strength, durability, flight, electrokinesis, and presumably magic. When he first shows up, he has already stolen the powers of a hero called Hawkwing, who we don't know, but he also goes on to gain all the Kryptonian-like powers of Bizarro, plus kryptonite immunity, the Firestorm Matrix powers of Deathstorm, Earth 3's Firestorm, the super speed abilities of Johnny Quick, and more, and more. While the characters he fought were arguably worse than him, no one from Earth 3 is really good, and he is absolutely terrifying. Number 3, Hunter Prey Doomsday. Doomsday was created on the planet Krypton as the ultimate life form, tested against that planet's harsh environment and eventually against the Kryptonians themselves. Doomsday's whole life cycle involves it being killed and then coming back stronger than whatever took it out. Over decades, that involved literal thousands of passings. Doomsday Doomsday essentially became a nearly undefeatable monster with no other thought process beyond destroying everything in front of him and moving on. After being the first ever being to ever take the life of Superman in Superman/Doomsday, Hunter/Prey, these two get a rematch. Doomsday has made his way to Apocalypse, and he is tearing the place to shreds, even facing Darkseid himself, totally tanking his Omega Beams and beating the snot out of the ruler of Apocalypse. It's in this story that we learn of Doomsday's past, and it's here that he evolves to the point of literally being unkillable. He cannot be defeated, and anything that tries only manages to empower him further. Superman has to get help from the time-traveling hero Wave Rider to trap Doomsday at the literal end of time in order for him to win. This is just regular Doomsday, so I'm kinda cheating by putting him on this list, but the monster got taken to the end of time in order to defeat him. That wasn't even fully enough. So I think he gets a place here. I think he deserved it. Number 2, Emperor Joker. The 5th dimensional imp, known as Mr. Mxyzptlk, has an extreme level of power. If this power fell into the wrong hands, it could potentially be reality ending. And we know this because in the Emperor Joker story, it falls into possibly the worst hands you can imagine. The Joker's. Mr. Mxyzptlk gets bored and wants to give Joker 1% of his power just to see the tricks the Joker is able to pull off, but instead, the Joker tricks Mr. Mxyzptlk into giving him 99.9% of his power instead. Joker uses this power to rewrite all of reality to become his sick, twisted dream world. It's horrific. He eats the whole population of China out of a Chinese food container box. He keeps everyone else stuck in a time loop, most importantly, Batman, who he introduces to the afterlife and reintroduces to it over and over again every day forever. He turned Flash into a slow-moving obese man and put Superman in a loop of constantly breaking out of Arkham Asylum. Superman, the Spectre, and Mr. Mxyzptlk, being the only ones who can remember the former world, team up to try to do something about this all-powerful Joker, but that's just the problem. He is all-powerful. He destroys all of reality, but as Superman points out to him, the Joker still can't bring himself to destroy Batman fully. He knows that he needs Batman to have any kind of meaning for existing in the first place. Because of that one small little thing, he loses control of his power, allowing the Spectre and Mr. Mxyzptlk to steal it back and fix all of reality. And finally, in at number 1, it's the Age of Apocalypse Magneto. In the reality of the Age of Apocalypse, Magneto leads this world's X-Men following the passing of his close friend Charles Xavier at the hands of Xavier's own son David Haller, who traveled back in time hoping to end Magneto, but basically missed. This Magneto, who has become a good guy in this universe, and his X-Men fight against the forces of this world's Apocalypse, who, without the interference of Xavier, was able to take over North America. Now Magneto's team is composed not only of classic X-Men, but also includes mutants like Sabretooth and other not so good guys. You know what I mean? Like kind of morally, In this timeline, Magneto is married to the mutant Rogue as well, and together they have a son named Charles. That doesn't make this Magneto more powerful or anything, but I think it's worthy of noting. Magneto and his son Charles are later personally captured by Apocalypse himself, though they are rescued by Rogue and the other X-Men, including Nate Gray, who raid Apocalypse's citadel in a desperate final attempt to save all of reality from Macron crystallization. There's a lot more to this story than just Magneto, but we're focusing on him. This Magneto isn't actually more powerful than his regular self, but thanks to the alternate history, he manages to be one of the best versions of the character, and honestly, the end fight between Apocalypse and Magneto is so awesome. Magneto literally uses his power to tear the celestial technology out of Apocalypse. It's so cool. Number 10, Calvin Ellis. Instead of Kal-El landing on a farm in Kansas, a black Kryptonian named Calvin Ellis was sent to Earth to escape his planet's destruction. Nevertheless, he didn't grow up trying to fit into society, as he instead became very ambitious. What do I mean by that? Well, Calvin Ellis worked hard enough to eventually become the President of the United States, giving him a position that allowed him to better protect his world both politically and physically. He still carried his role as Superman and even became a multiversal hero when he teamed up with the other versions of the character during the Infinite Frontier era. Calvin Ellis gained political power as well as his own incredible Kryptonian abilities, not to mention that he reprogrammed the alien intelligence Brainiac to help him in his duties. He's also a talented boxer. So there's that as well. Number 9. Eradicator Lois. For this point, we are going to go back in time to the infamous death of Superman. When Superman fell in the fight between himself and Doomsday, it didn't hit anyone as hard as it hit Lois Lane. In the dark multiverse, however, something curious happened. After some time passed and Lois saw the effects of a Superman-less world, she eventually traveled to the Fortress of Solitude to return Superman's cape. What she didn't expect to happen was for the Kryptonian Eradicator to show up. This defender of Krypton is the reason that Superman does eventually come back, placing Clark in the Kryptonian life matrix that was supposed to revive Superman. In this story though, it takes longer than expected. Assuming that the revival was a failure, the Eradicator instead places the powers of Superman into the body of Lois Lane. Unfortunately, this is the dark multiverse though, and so this newly superpowered Lois Lane throws almost all caution to the wayside and uses her powers recklessly, saving the day, but with no regard for collateral damage or repercussions. She ends wars, feeds the hungry, destroys the military-industrial complex, all that good stuff, but she also wipes out countless lives, including Batman's, Lex Luthor's, and she's even responsible for the fall of Superman again when he finally does return. The whole story is tragic, but it's also really cool. And to maybe check out part 1 to make sure I didn't miss any of your favorite alternate DC Universe superheroes. Number 8. Batman Who Laughs. While the Batman Who Laughs was Bruce Wayne from Earth -22 of the Dark Multiverse, he basically becomes the most powerful alternate version of the Joker and Batman ever. Everything about this Batman remained relatively the same until the day the Joker found out he was going to pass away, and so he decided to take everyone with him. Joker took down a large number of Batman's rogues gallery, including Catwoman. He caused the passing of Commissioner Gordon, and he paralyzed Batman, forcing the Dark Knight to watch as the Joker took the lives of countless innocent people. Once Batman regained his movement though, he lost it and put the Joker to rest. Now, as his one last sick joke, a toxin in the Joker's heart escaped his body, infecting Batman and turning him into the most terrifying Joker-Batman hybrid you have ever seen. With all the intelligence and physical ability of Batman mixed with the insanity and psychosis of the Joker, the Batman Who Laughs is off the chain. He has a book on how to destroy the multiverse, as well as a real-world comic book that lays out the structure of the universe. He has a pack of metal cards that can warp reality, he has a pack of feral Jokerized Robins, and he can corrupt people to his side with his Joker toxin, like Shazam as an example. He wiped out all the heroes of his universe and several others and put together a squad of evil Batmen who he used to become one of the biggest threats in the multiverse, almost bringing the end of everything. He's not better, but he's cool. Number 7. Furnace. Before the Martians became the Martians, they were an incredibly violent and powerful race called the Burning. The Guardians of the Universe experimented on the Burning and put genetic blocks in place to make them afraid of the fire that they used as their most powerful weapon. That's why Martian Manhunter has a fear of fire. Now, after the Justice League was trapped and taken down in Obsidian Age Atlantis, John Jones blamed himself for his friend's passing because his fear of fire completely overtook him. So, he recruits Scorch to help him overcome his fear, and he would use his telepathy to help her deal with her own problems. Now, unfortunately, in doing this, he also broke the genetic blocks, allowing John to become the incredibly dangerous Furnace, with all of his original powers boosted in potential, especially his telepathy, plus an insane level of pyrokinesis. Number 6. All-Star Superman. All-Star Superman is actually a 12-issue series that sets itself apart from the rest of the DC universe by sort of being a standalone story. At the beginning of the tale, Superman saves an exploration mission to the sun that was sabotaged by Lex Luthor. But because of his overexposure to the yellow sun, he ends up developing new abilities such as the power to harness the bioelectric aura and pushing his normal abilities to unimaginable levels. But it wasn't just his powers that got a boost. His intellect, creativity, imagination, and curiosity also got boosted up to the point that he started getting new skills and trying out new experiments, even some that would allow a successor for himself to be created. That's important because while his abilities and mental acuity had been boosted up, and he even became immune to green kryptonite, the overexposure to the sun also meant he was starting to slowly pass away as his cells became overloaded, causing this story to get really damn emotional. Number 5. Vampire Batman. In the Elseworlds Batman and Dracula trilogy, Batman goes up against vampires who have turned Gotham into their home, and then eventually he goes up against Dracula himself. In the first novel, Red Rain, the hero wipes out the vampires and Dracula, although he is transformed into a vampire himself, which means we get to see Batman take on crime using the powers of a vampire in the very next novel, Bloodstorm. He does his bestest to resist the darker aspects of being a vampire, but that all goes kaput when Batman lashes out and drains the Joker after the Joker de-lifed Catwoman. Now, Batman has Alfred and Gordon stake him, putting Batman into a catatonic state. A state that he was then revived from in the third book, Crimson Mist, when criminals took over Gotham in his absence. But he is almost completely animalistic now thanks to the isolation. A bloodthirsty vampire Batman quickly wipes out most of his enemies in a very brutal form, draining them in the process until he is finally put to rest by Alfred, Commissioner Gordon, Two-Face, and Killer Croc, who all go with him to the grave. Number 4. Strange Visitor Superman. Another Superman. I know, but okay, before we start, technically, this Superman is not canon, but he is truly one of the more powerful versions of the character ever. In the story, Superman outlives everything in the universe, living for literally billions and billions and billions of years. He lives so long and gets so powerful that he gains new abilities like being able to split into thousands of copies that allow the hero to do what he does best throughout the universe at the same time. He outlives all the gods, cosmic entities, mortals, angels, demons, and everything. He watches countless civilizations rise and fall and learns an insane amount of skills like telepathy, which I didn't even know was a skill. He absorbs ridiculous amounts of energy, learns magic and strange sciences through all his copies, and then he reabsorbs them at the end of everything. He can fly faster than the entropic waves of the end of the universe and can manipulate the fabric of reality through sheer strength. Number 3. Nightwing the New Order. In the year 2028, all-out war between heroes and villains had broke out in the streets of Metropolis. There was countless lost lives and destruction caused by the conflict for days, but after Batman passed away in the conflict, Nightwing activated a device in the war-torn streets of Metropolis that shut off or dampened the superpowers of most of the world, believing it was the best cause of action to save humanity from the dangers of the superpowered population. After this, Dick Grayson began a relationship with Starfire, and together they had a son named Jake. Now, as time went on, Starfire progressively fell out of love with Dick and resented his cause. One day, after Dick had been chosen to lead the new Crusaders division to hunt metahumans, Starfire left Dick without saying a word, forcing him to raise their son alone in Wayne Manor. Now, it turns out, Jake, Nightwing's son, is a metahuman with superpowers, and Nightwing now has to go against everything he previously stood for to save his son from the world that he created. Tell me that's not cool. It's cool. Number 2. Aurora of Themyscira. Comics seem to continuously supply us with things that we never thought we needed. In a moment not likely to ever happen again in the near future, the House of DC and the House of Marvel were friends. They could talk, they could play nice, and to prove that, one of the most beloved moments came in the mid-1990s when these two companies joined forces for a crossover. This took place in the amalgamated world of Earth 9602. On this Earth, it was not Diana Prince who became Wonder Woman. Instead, a meta-mutant child by the name of Aurora was rescued and raised as a princess by the Amazons by Queen Hippolyta, alongside Diana Prince. The two fought alongside each other as they grew up, but when the time came to choose who would be Wonder Woman, Aurora's natural ability to control and harness the forces of weather, plus her Amazonian training, allowed her to secure the victory. She went off to become one hell of a hero when she finally left the island to enter man's world. It's an interesting take on the character, and you should definitely check it out. And finally, in at number 1, Batman of Earth 32. Unexpected is probably how I would describe the Batman from Earth 32. Now, the original Batman of this universe was Bruce Wayne, who also became a Green Lantern, and then flew off into space. When he left the Earth to serve in the Green Lantern Corps, it left the role of Batman open, and Who would have guessed that of all the characters, Alexander Luthor would be the one to answer the call? First appearing in Lex Luthor Year of the Villain #1 from November 2019, this Batman was partnered up with Super Martian, which is a cross between a Martian like Martian Manhunter and a Kryptonian like Superman. As you can imagine, they were a powerful combo. They took up a base of operations in what looked like the Batcave but mixed with the Fortress of Solitude and were assisted by Fred, their awesome robotic butler. Thanks to having the Martian as his partner, Lex Batman was well acquainted with telepathy, and while it caused him some pretty bad headaches, it was also instrumental in helping deal with the Prime Earth Lex Luthor when he inevitably showed up on this world.